What if love, loss, and longing weren't the end of your story, but the beginning of a deeper journey into freedom, joy, and creativity? Hi, and welcome to the You World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life, health, transformational coaches, and spiritual entrepreneurs stepping up to be the change they seek in the world. I'm your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist, on a mission to help coaches and entrepreneurs amplify their voice, monetize their mission, and get visible. If you're ready to start attracting premium clients without chasing algorithms or hunting people down like a banshee on a mission, head on over to coachesalchemist.com and schedule your free client acquisition audit. It's the first step to building a business where your clients seek you out rather than having to hunt them down yourself. Today, we're chatting with Deborah Jean Weitzman. Deborah is a performer, teacher, writer, and truth seeker who's been traveling and living abroad since 1990. A native New Yorker now based in Oslo, Norway, she weaves music, teaching, and storytelling into her life's work. Deborah is the author of Pandora Learns to Sing and her newly released novel, The Sinking of Leonardo da Vinci, which has been warmly received on major platforms. She helps others liberate their voices and discover how to live healthy, sustainable, and joy-filled lives while embracing both the light and darker emotions that make us fully human. Welcome to the show, Deborah. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So let's ask you the big question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What's the most significant thing in your opinion as individuals we can do to make an impact on how the world is going?
Well, be an example myself, as I think Gandhi said that, and yeah, be of service when I can.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your book a little bit.
Can I show
Um,
it?
yeah, please do. For those of you just listening, she's showing us her book, The Sinking of Leonardo da Vinci. How did you come up with that title? It's kind of
Well, I realize it now because all the time when I was working on this book, I the title was always metaphorical,
Mhm,
and now that it's out, some people think it's a kind of Titanic story about a sinking, and it absolutely isn't. The actual boat itself, there was once a cruise line, the Leonardo da Vinci, and it
mhm,
sunk way after the story takes place. So
mhm,
it's more metaphorical that yeah, it sort of comes into the story. So I don't want to give it away. It's
mhm.
it yeah, so it has a more metaphorical meaning than another Titanic story.
Interesting. So it's an actual boat. We're not talking about the artist. It's a boat named after the artist.
It's actually, yeah, the boat, right, right.
Okay. Is
When
it?
I was very young, I worked as a travel agent, and it was a very different time. And the travel agents would go as fam trips
Mhm,
to, like, they would get invited to a hotel or an island or a cruise, and they would be on that trip for the whole, in my case, 11 days, and then go back to the travel agency and sell it. That was the
mhm,
thing. So, yeah, and I was very young, very poor kid from New York City, with no nice clothes. So my boss had to give me money to buy nice clothing. And I went on this cruise, and that actually really happened in my life. And it was a very strong experience. I mean, obviously, I fell in love on that boat with a
mhm,
beautiful, beautiful young Italian navigator. And, I remembered the story, but many years later, I had boxes in my mom's basement in the States, and she was moving and found out my boxes had been destroyed in a flood that she forgot to tell me about. So my husband and I went with hazmat suits and masks way before COVID to try to see if I could salvage things, and everything was destroyed except one
mhm,
diary. One diary was like had like sparkles on it, and it was the diary of this story, of this
mhm,
love story. And there were letters in this diary, his name. And then I was living in Berlin at the time, Oslo and Berlin, and I was reading my own diary on the plane and was so intrigued. I mean, it was me, but I didn't remember. And all these details. And even at that time, 1976, I had a geology professor who ends up being very important in my novel. that was already talking about climate change in 1976. And I was like,
Wow.
kind of, I think my mouth was hanging open about my own life. And then I had so many questions. I mean, in that time, when you said goodbye to somebody,
Yeah,
you
that's pretty
never
much it.
saw them again. And I was always curious what happened.
Interesting. I lived overseas a lot when I was young, and I my dad was in the military, so I understand that when you say goodbye, when you said goodbye to people, you never saw them again. You never expected to see them again. But my experience has been I've run into a lot of these people because of Facebook, honestly. And the internet has made it possible for us to reconnect with people that we couldn't.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when I was first deciding to write a novel, which was already now 14 years ago, I mean, I'm not a fast writer and I edit a lot and change and work with coaches and so I actually tried to find him on Facebook. I did,
Mhm,
but he wasn't on Facebook or any of the social media things. So, yeah. I did actually see this person again, which is another story, and that's not in the novel.
mhm.
But yeah, at that time when I started writing, I just was just one head of questions. So what does a writer do? Create the answer, right?
Yeah. And
So
sometimes that's even better than what has the timeline that unfolded that you might not have remembered. You
right,
can
right.
you can make up the ending however you want to remember it.
And then also I imagine because I had left New York
Mhm,
and then I was imagining well, like what would have happened if and the character is not exactly me, but yeah, she has parts of me, but I also gave her other things that I was
mhm,
really curious about. And what
mhm,
if, she stays in New York? She
mhm.
marries, um, this other person, and then what happens to her? So, and the book starts with this much older husband.
Mhm,
He dies, and
mhm.
then she goes to Italy. Yeah, partly to heal, partly to grieve, partly to see what's going to be. She has a leave of absence, so that's how the story begins.
Is
Yeah.
she still a travel agent? I was a travel agent many years ago, like almost 30 years ago, before the internet stuff started
Right, right.
happening. So I was like the paper tickets and stuff. And so when you're talking about this, and I was also a realtor. I've done a lot of things. Um
Well, no, she doesn't. The older Joanna, because it's a braided story, so the younger, which actually came some from my diary, she
mhm.
works as a travel agent while she's at university. But
Okay.
then, yeah, then
She goes off and does something else.
and she
Interesting.
actually becomes a music therapist. So she
Oh,
works as
okay.
a music therapist in New York City.
So
And you,
all of this
sorry,
kind of comes around to you help people have a voice
I
through
do.
music and through writing and
And I don't know if you know Alexander technique. That's my other job. It's a beautiful body, energetic work. It's actually quite old. It's
Mhm,
sort of so we say the grandma, grandfather of many of the works we have now. And I learned it when I was having singing lessons many, many, many years ago.
mhm,
And it really helps so much that I combined. So all the years I gave singing lessons or in workshops, I combined the Alexander work into the singing, into the moving. So it's all sort of organically together. Yeah.
I love that. Do you actually help people with that now, or is it how, how does the coaching part of what you do work? I,
Well, I
I'm
mean,
curious
now
about that.
everybody uses the word coaching, so
Mhm.
coaching, teaching, helping. I mean,
They're all kind of interchangeable.
yeah, so I've been alive for quite some time and I became a certified teacher of Alexander Technique in 1988. Before
Okay.
that, I was just a music teacher. I went to university, studied music therapy and music.
Mhm.
And because I was, maybe this is, they have that adage, there's those who teach and those who do. And for
Mhm,
me, it was still one more thing because I also did and I taught because I was still learning. So for
mhm,
me, teaching was a great chance to keep learning. I worked as a singer-songwriter. I mean, now I don't tour. I mean, I wish, but I don't have that many gigs like I used to.
mhm,
But when I was young and my hair was not gray and I had long hair, yeah, I sometimes looked a lot like Joan Baez actually. So,
mhm.
and I ended up getting a recording contract in the Netherlands, also in the 90s. And I ended up moving to Europe because everything is closer there. I don't really like to drive. And as a singer-songwriter in America, you're really driving, driving, driving. So before that, the tours in America were, it's always like you can almost sing 500 miles between each gig. So in Europe, it's also much more compact, and you can take a train, you don't have to drive. So I ended up moving. That's partly why I moved to Europe, for the music.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's different when you're overseas, even as an American overseas. The the ability to move around in community is so different than it
Mm,
is here. I mean, if you take a train, which is very rare, uh, even in I don't know. I haven't lived in New York, so you probably were used to the subways and stuff in New York, but my vision of the subways in New York is scary. Whereas I spent a lot of time on the trains in Japan when I was
mhm.
growing up, because I took the trains to school every day.
Wow.
We lived on a base and I went to school in Yokohama. So it was like I was young and there was no big thing for me to I could go to Tokyo if I wanted. I did at
Yeah.
times go to Tokyo and I wasn't even a teenager, I don't think by that time. Well, I was just a teenager. I was very young. But it was just like you didn't worry about stuff like you worry about now. I mean, it's like
Well, I haven't been to New York for a while, but I was there a couple of years ago and I took the subway all the time.
mm,
I mean, it's a great way to travel. It's noisy. I mean,
mhm,
here in Oslo, our subway is quieter, newer, because people mostly only take public transport here.
uh-huh.
S- So it's really important. Yeah.
It's just this different way of being, not
Yeah.
having a car or not having to depend on a car.
Yeah. Yeah, I've
I like
hardly
it.
driven since I've left. But anyway, there isn't actually, I realized in my novel, because I've been doing the audiobook now, so I'm
Uh-huh.
almost finished. There is some scenes, there is some subway in this book,
Hmm.
and actually only one scene in a car, because most of it takes place in this area of Cinque Terre where everything is walking, and they have this train that connects the town. So there's walking trains. So I really love that. Yeah.
I love that too. I
Well,
like the ability to encourage people to get out of cars.
mm,
There's even here, I live close enough that I can walk to the grocery store often, and I have a
right.
wagon, and I just take my wagon, do my weekly shopping. People laugh at me in the store, but I don't care. It's just like I don't really have to drive that much, and
Mhm.
and I like it. It
Can I tell you a little funny story? I
yeah,
don't know.
please do.
Maybe it doesn't have to do with anything, but when my mom was living, she's passed away. She was in Florida. She was a snowbird.
Hmm.
And Florida, you can imagine, you really do need to drive. But we
Yeah.
didn't have a car, so we would stay with her for quite some weeks. So I had this bicycle with a basket that I borrowed from one of my cousins. And the shop was about, I don't know, a mile away. So it
Mhm.
wasn't like undoable. Anyway, I had bought a little bit too much and I kind of loaded everything into this bicycle, got ready to go, and the whole thing, fell over. All my groceries were everywhere.
Oh,
And
oh.
this man just came out of his car and started helping me. And he was so friendly and seemed to really be enjoying it that a little part of me thought, oh, is he going to like flirt with me? But when I had my bike back up and everything was there, and I thanked him and I asked him, he seemed to be like, you really seem to be enjoying this. And he said, are you kidding? This is Florida. When does this ever happen? That an attractive woman falls over with her bicycle and I have to help her put her groceries back in the basket. Never, he said. This never happens. I feel like I'm in a TV show. So that was really funny. Yeah, it was
Yeah, and
romantic.
you made somebody's day.
I did. I think I made his day. And maybe who knows how many times he told the story. You're not going to believe what happened today.
This woman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just stuff like that. I saw, I think it was a video that I saw of a guy who went to Walmart with his scooter, but it had a handle thing on it. It was like a
yeah.
motorized scooter. And he had all of his bags hooked to his body. He had these hooks. He had a getup that had little hooks on them so he could hang the bags all over his body. And then he gets on the scooter, goes home, and he must have weighed, probably 100 pounds. I mean, groceries get heavy fast, but they're just like all over his body, and he's on his scooter.
You can be very creative when when you don't have the car. Yeah,
It's fun,
yeah.
It- and you inspire somebody else to do something out of the ordinary instead of just, the same old take your car and
So back to the question that sorry, I probably did
yeah,
my
you're
me,
good.
but yeah, so I'm not a youngster anymore. So and I do get a little pension, which is very nice. So
Mhm,
I don't have to work like I did most of my life. I just had to. But
mhm,
I still really love to work. And I don't get a very huge pension. I think I get $400 from the US because I was an artist, right? So,
yeah.
artists they don't take very seriously. Anyway, so I still give workshops. I was just teaching in Belgium,
Mhm,
and I have some people that come for private sessions. So I work a combination with them, helping them find their breath, helping them, if they're working on their voice, or maybe it's a character in a play, so it doesn't only have to be voice, singing voice, or sometimes it's somebody who's a teacher and they want to have a little more voice. I've also had people who are preparing for TED Talks to try to
mhm.
get a little bit more pizzazz and flow in their voice. So yeah, I
And
do all these kind of things.
you were just talking about, doing your audiobook. That's a huge thing these days. A lot of
Actually,
people are writing and they
I'm now that I'm almost at the end, I definitely can probably help other people because it's really quite a process. The
it
whole
is.
yeah, it's really something, and it's I have a lot of characters in my book, and I didn't realize I had so many characters with so many different accents. So, and sometimes they're in the same scene, and I trained as an actress a long time ago. So I can act, but you have to like do everything together. You have to have like all these characters in your head, all the different voices. And, I'm not doing like extreme accents because, first of all, I think it's really, really hard. So I'm more giving the characters nuance,
Mhm,
a little, a little taste of where they're from. I did do a little bit more with the Australian and the Italian just because in a way it's expected.
mhm.
They're almost like cliches by now, the Australian person or the Italian person. So yeah,
And people have it in their head. If they're reading it, they're those accents go off. I
yeah,
mean, just like
yeah.
my husband and I read out loud to each other a lot. So when you
Great.
talk about reading, like we read through series of books to each
Wow.
other. It's just like something we like to do. But when
Wow.
you talk about reading out loud, when you're creating an audible book, there's a lot to it. And the way that you can know this is just try reading a chapter out loud to somebody else. It's it's
Yeah.
hard.
I mean, sometimes I think I'm going really well because I'm new at this, and I have
Mhm.
a really young, sweet engineer who's helping me, and and then I think, oh, I did it great. and then there was like a sound from my pants, or you had a, or I sometimes I get animated. I think my body thinks I'm Italian all the time, so I'm moving my hands, and then I knock the microphone, and then I have to do the line again, or you get a little burp, or you get a kind of wrongly pronounced word. So it's yeah, but I'm really happy. 20 pages to go out of
That's
200
a lot.
pages. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there. And then we have to do the corrections. Yeah, but we're getting there. So whew,
Amazing.
yeah. Yeah.
So, if you're out there and you've written a book and you would like to get it to be an Audible book, because, Audible's the thing on Amazon. Let's
Is
be
that really,
real.
is it very popular now?
It's very popular, and people, if you have an Audible book, then um you can listen while you're doing other stuff, which
Right.
a lot of people like a lot.
Hmm. You can
So,
listen while you're driving. That's how I got into
yeah.
it. I mean,
Yeah.
we were talking earlier about driving. I don't drive here, but we have a camper car
Mhm.
and sometimes take trips to the south because here in Norway, it's already getting to be winter. It's a very short summer. So yeah, and I can't do the long winter here. It's really too long and too dark. So we've been finding ways to live cheaply and take the camper. We have a small camper.
Having
So that we,
adventures.
yeah, and then we listen to the audiobooks. I'm actually working on a new book now. During the first, well, I think 2021, we lived in the camper in the south of Italy for like 10 months during COVID.
Oh, fun.
So that book is called Italy with Nobody in It, but that's not out yet. So yeah, I'm still this one, the sinking of the Leonardo da Vinci. Yeah.
And where can people find that book?
Well, obviously it's on Amazon, it's
Mhm.
on all the platforms. It's yeah, I think we're still going to keep it a little bit longer, so there's a promotion going, so yeah, it's not too expensive on Kindle and all the different iBook and all that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I guess in a few months there'll be an audiobook. Yeah, but
That's
not
very
yet.
exciting.
Yeah, I still have some more work to do.
I have these other questions. I think I'm going to ask a couple of them because I'd really like your take on them. So
Sure.
one of them is you talk about meeting our anxieties and darker emotions with creativity. What does that look like in practice and how can we start?
Well, again, this is very much what the book is about because
Mhm.
as I have worked a lot with this, I have my character work with it. Um, well, first of all, when we're in anxiety, we're often holding our breath.
Mhm.
Or having a panic attack, it's usually, besides whatever is going through your mind, the body is needing breath, it's needing air. So the first thing, if we can move out of it, I mean, often people will learn when I was recovering from my panic when I was young, to count our breath. That a lot of people practice like this box breathing
Mhm.
because just the counting of your breath begins to slow it down and you have more breath and you allow more breath. So any kind of moving. So like let's say one of the things I've started doing, even though I'm all wrinkled and you know, no face work, you know, I'm in my golden years, but I've been making these little recordings of improvisations. So this kind of creativity. So for example, you're feeling uh, and you start, I mean, if you think, oh, I can't sing, I never did it, think of some food that you like. Smell the food. What delicious spaghetti. So you start with this hum and let that travel through you and just start letting the sound just start moving through, even if you have no idea, it will move through. Making sound, moving, these are so much part of our little bodies. I mean, of our bodies, especially when we were little, it
Mhm.
all began. So it's all in there, you know?
Do you
So,
think when we hum at our own personal vibration, like the healing high vibration that our body needs.
I think there's definitely a potential for that. I mean, it depends. Like sometimes when I work with a student, I mean, I just came from a workshop recently,
Mhm.
and one student was very afraid. So her voice at first was, "Mm." So then maybe it wasn't yet at the healing vibration. But as I do some Alexander with her, letting the body expand a little bit, it comes deeper in, and then absolutely yes. Oh, yes. All that is really good for us. Sure.
I was looking into transcendental meditation a while ago, and they talk about they give you a word that you say in your head, um, but that word causes a vibration in your
Absolutely.
body, which
Mhm.
I think impacts. There's a lot of studies that have been done about transcendental meditation specifically, and that it's really helpful for you to do it because
Sure.
it heals your body. But all of these things have to do with breathing and
Well, breathe.
regulating.
I mean, you could even, if anybody's listening there and you think, what the heck are they talking about? You can put your hand just here, and think that you're a little bit yawning inside, and you let your lips slightly touch. So you don't want it like you're making the sound in your throat. I
Mhm.
often think of like you're an elephant, but then you can actually feel it starting to vibrate.
Mhm.
So I have done transcendental meditation, but lately I actually, well, the last years, I prefer the mantra that Tina Turner made famous, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. It also
Mhm.
has that
Yep.
vibration element, and it's all these things are great. Absolutely.
I have a four-part mantra sort of thing that I do, but it is incorporate. I'm sorry, I'm just like I can't get the words out. It incorporates breathing into it. I find that I'm breathing with it
Mhm.
in different ways. I usually do it at night when I'm going to sleep, and it helps regulate all of the things that are trying to stay awake when you
Mhm.
want them to go to sleep, starting with
Yeah.
your mind.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, no, this stuff I think it's great. I mean, of course, when I was younger and still, let's call it the younger part of me, wishes she got very, very famous, that I could do a concert and everybody knew the words of my songs. I only had that a little bit. I was a little bit famous, not big famous.
Mhm.
Um, but now, in my yeah, in these years of, I call them my extra years because I never thought I would live this long. I just sing every day. I just sing every day because it's so good. I have some asthma, which I think a lot of people have. And then asthma is really stealing your lung capacity. And the singing really helps, really helps. So, anyone out there, and especially if you have any forest nearby, because the trees resonate and make our voice sound so good. And when your voice sounds better, you feel more encouraged to make sound.
I love that. I have to tell you, my husband, I tease him. He's always got a song in his heart and coming out of his mouth. He literally is always singing, and you can tell what he's thinking about because of what he's singing. It's like, hmm,
That's good. That's
it is
good.
really good.
It's very good for all the fascia and all the joints. And yeah, I think I don't know if they've measured this, but well, they have done some measurements that any kind of music is very good for the brain. Yeah.
It's good for your whole body. It's just the vibration that washes over you. I did hear that they changed the frequency that they tune stuff to. Um, I don't know, a long time ago.
Hmm.
It's not like in the last few years, but it used to be at like 400 and some hertz, and now it's at a 400 and different hertz. Um,
It's
and I
mostly 440 now. I think
440.
I don't remember if it was higher or lower, but it used to be different. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that the difference has affected us as humans. And
Oh,
I found that interesting too.
well,
I
I'm curious. Well, I hope in a good way. Well, who knows? It's pretty crazy times, but
could be good, could be bad. I don't know.
well,
And
and
vibrations affect water too. I mean, you just took a drink of water, but water is like one of those other things that it's just like the when you sing and hum and you energize yourself in a positive way, it really helps the water that's in your body that we are mostly water beings, and it helps everything just work the way it's supposed to in a beautiful way.
yeah, it's great. Oh, it's a pleasure to talk with you, Jill. Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
it's funny that we're sitting here on the screen. Suddenly I forgot I was going to reach for my coffee. Like we're having a coffee here. This is great. But yeah.
I never know where these conversations are going to go.
Yeah.
So you also talk about activism and escapism. Do you do you believe we need both, or how
Absolutely.
do you find the balance between them?
Yeah, with this novel of mine, I mean, some of the different people, the endorsements, I sent it to, yeah, quite a famous writer, and he wrote, "Do you need a chance to escape into a sweeter world? This is the novel to take you there." So this is a book to escape into, but what I like about it is it's not only escape, because in it because of the different characters, there's themes of climate change, of living sustainably, of finding community, also big questions about love and family. So in the escaping, it's I won't say it's an Alice in Wonderland kind of thing because it's a realistic story. But the different characters that she meets are bringing up different themes. So I've really been enjoying it myself doing the audiobook because it's not over your head, but
Mhm,
it's kind of like little bits of sensible information. Like for
mhm,
example, I mean one of these things I love that when we're burning fire, like you have a bonfire,
mhm.
it's the ancient sun energy being released. In
Interesting.
Norway. Isn't that beautiful?
It
So
is
I
beautiful.
things like this in the book, little weavings. So it's not too much. And it takes place after 9/11, the rated one of the stories.
Hmm.
And it's not heavy about that. It's not anything, like what happened and everything, but just, because one of the characters she meets is a journalist from Holland, actually, and
Hmm.
also in Italy. And just some of what Bill, was part of the story of the politics, not just in the States, and I found it very interesting. So, because I mean, now we have a lot of historians that are kind of guiding us in this time, and there is something about sort of connecting it into what led us here, and how can we, hopefully move in a more positive direction, I hope. Yeah.
I hope so too. And I think that's really, it's important that we weave what we remember about these experiences into the things that we're bringing forward, because young people don't remember what the world was like pre-internet
Mhm.
or back in the 60s and 70s when things were fundamentally different. I mean, we didn't have microwaves. I
I
remember
know.
when microwaves were like $1,000 and they were
Mhm.
huge, and we
And
didn't.
I've actually never had one in my whole entire life. I've never
So
had one.
proud of you. I don't have one. I haven't had one in years, but um I remember when they came out, and VCRs and the whole people binge movies now on their television sets, but it didn't used to be like that.
Mhm.
If you wanted to watch a television show, you better get there on time or you're out of
Right,
luck.
and we waited once a week, right? We wait,
Yeah.
I remember Sunday nights watching Bonanza when I was a kid, you know.
Yeah.
Right, right. I know it does feel like it was a simpler time, but yeah. I remember I had a boyfriend. I was quite young. I did a lot of folk dancing, and I had a boyfriend for a short time from MIT before the computer came out. And he told me, you'll see in a few years, it's all going to be computers. And then 20 years from now, people won't be able to be without their computer. And I said, oh, no, that can never happen. Uh, uh, I mean,
I
I can't be without my phone or my computer, right? It's crazy, but
I
there we
learned
are.
to type on a typewriter with, the old one with the striker keys.
Yeah.
And you probably know the answer to this, but I'll bet a lot of our listeners don't. Do you know why the keyboard is set up the way it is?
Because of those old typewriters, that I know, because I learned how to type on them. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because if
The touch type. Yeah.
yeah, but if you get going really fast and you had to have really strong fingers to do it, you
You
could
did.
get those keys to stick
That's right.
and they would stop you because you have to untangle all your keys.
But
But
it's funny that you said that. Yesterday here in Oslo, I had my second book event, which was really fun. And it was really a charming little bookstore. And I'm not any kind of famous writer, but I did what I could to put it out there and I made cute posters. And so, it was getting full. And there was one woman who came with two little kids. And she said, okay, before you start, my little daughter, I think she was 4 or 5, they actually had an old typewriter. And she was banging away. And she said, I promise I'll get her to stop when you start your reading. Because it was like, it's really very noisy, those tick, 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 tick.
yeah, they were really noisy and it's a really like, you had to
It's
hit
almost,
those puppies
yeah.
hard.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually never seen it, but there's a game that I know is very popular in America. You'll know what I mean. It's not it's from ping pong, but where people are
Oh,
on
pickleball.
pickleball, right? It almost
Yeah.
sounds like the pickleball.
Yeah. I didn't
Yeah.
get pickleball for a long time either.
Yeah, we don't have it here in Europe, but again, when I was visiting my mom, I would
Hmm.
just hear it. I would do. She was living in one of those condominiums, and I would do like walking loops, and
Hmm.
then when I would pass the pickleball court. You could hear all that bing, 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 the
I
ball.
think they're like plastic balls or something. It's kind of funny.
Concrete, so it was like a little bit like a typewriter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. So how do people get in touch with you, Deborah?
Well, I'm on Facebook with Deborah Jean Weitzman. My Instagram is Deborah Jean New with a W. So JeAnneW. And I have my website, Deborah DeborahJeanne.com. Yeah. And
And
then
you're
of course
on Substack.
and I'm on Substack. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really enjoying it. I do a newsletter once a week. And usually on Friday, although today I was in the studio all day, but I usually put an improv, something with me with my ukulele or sitting at the piano. Yeah, so I may put one out tomorrow. Yeah, so I have that music and I do some notes and yeah, I've really been enjoying meeting people like you. I think this is my third live or this kind of thing I'm doing and
Mhm.
I love it. Yeah, I would love to do more. So anyone out there who has a podcast, I'd love to be a guest on your podcast.
Awesome. Well, we'll see what we can do about that. Thanks so
Thanks.
much for joining us today, Deborah.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye.
To learn more about Deborah and to learn more about liberating your voice, please consider subscribing to deborahjeanweitzman.substack.com, and we'll be sure to put the links to both sites in the show notes below. Thanks for tuning in today to the You World Order Showcase podcast. If you're ready to amplify your voice, monetize your mission, and start attracting premium clients, your next step is simple. Head to thecoachesalchemist.com and schedule your free client acquisition audit. Be sure to join us for our next episode as we share what others are doing to raise the global frequency. And remember, change begins with you. You have all the power to change the world. Start today and get visible.